Hi, Shavonne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining. I know it's quite late where you are.
It's only midnight. It's not too bad.
Oh my gosh. I feel like once the sun sets, I become like incapable of having a coherent conversation. So props to you for joining and being down to talk to us.
Oh, I'm the opposite. I'm very awake at night, but I'm completely useless in the morning. So I just skip mornings totally.
Oh wow. I even like find myself waking up earlier in the morning so I have more time to like use my brain because it works the best in the morning. So it's like fascinating to hear that you're like a night owl kind of.
Yeah, I'm totally a night owl. Like I think it started from school. I felt
Mm,
like it was easier to procrastinate through the day and then like rush work at night and like you basically sleep when you finish it as opposed to you wake up and like there's a more fixed amount of hours to work.
yeah, I think I have like the like I think I'm so traumatized from pulling all-nighters from school, staying up late to finish work that now I'm like, "Oh, you have to like get it done like early. You better wake up early."
Yeah, no, I can't wake up early. Like my brain's useless then.
Yeah, totally. I guess let's just get into it. So today with me on New Arrivals, we have Shavonne Wong, who is an incredible artist. And I'm really excited to chat with you today. I feel like you have such like an interesting background. And I guess wondering like, can you tell us a little bit about I guess your art background? I know you have kind of like a very like you've done a lot of freelance photography for a lot of sort of prestigious clients, and I'm curious like what your background with photography is.
Yeah, sure. So I did photography. I was a professional fashion photographer for about a decade. Right out of school, I was flipping through magazines and I saw like fashion photography works and I thought, oh, that can't be too hard. Famous last words.
Hmm.
And I was just like, yeah, let's try it. And so that was really how I just got into it. Like the way I started was that I just rented a studio, dragged my sister, and then borrowed my friend's camera and just started shooting. And I realized that it was kind of fun. I really enjoyed it. So I just moved on more from that, doing more and more shoots. I started getting paid from working with student designers, photographing for their projects, and then getting bigger and bigger jobs. And so, like, it was kind of interesting because I never really made the decision that I was gonna be a fashion photographer as a career. It
Hmm.
was just sort of one of those things that I was like, hey, they're paying me. I
Hmm.
should probably register a company to get properly paid.
Hmm.
And then I was like, I'll do it. And that was kind of how I just ended up in the career. And I've been very, very fortunate, very, very blessed that I got to work with like some really, really cool brands and had some opportunities that I would have never expected. So like one of the cool opportunities that I got was I got to be a guest photographer for Asia's Next Top Model, which
Oh
was
wow,
like, oh my God. Yeah. And
iconic.
I think that I used to grow up watching American Next Top Model on my parents' bedroom. So like, it's kind of like, wow, I'm part of the franchise. That's cool. And that was really a really fun experience. Like I think it was very stressful, obviously. Like it's one thing to do a photo shoot for a client and another to do it for TV.
Hmm.
But like it just gave me a lot more exposure and that really helped me to get, even bigger clients. So like some of my clients list involves like photographing for L'Offishelle, photographing for Cosmopolitan, photographing Billy Porter for Vogue magazine. So like, yeah, that I think that was the highlight of my life, like getting to work with Billy Porter because like he's just such an incredible, character and one thing that I had felt like when I got to photograph this city was like after years of photographing models who are often blank slates, I was working with somebody with so much character that was just such a different experience photographing him. Anyway, yeah, so like these are some of the many incredible experiences that I got that I'm very, very thankful for because like even now I still think that they were absolutely insane.
Yeah, I love that you have so many sort of different types of photography that you've done, and I'm curious, like, I don't know, of the types of assignments, whether it was like editorial or like fashion campaigns or for Asia's Next Top Model, if I guess what are the different things that you expected from those shoots and like what did you like, how are they different from each other? I feel like there must be so many artists in here who are photographers who maybe don't have sort of background experience doing freelance photography and like the way that those different types of photo shoots can be. Um, I'm
Oh
curious.
yeah,
Yeah, go for it.
I can speak on that. So like, in photography, for what I was working, that was obviously arranged. There was the commercial advertising work, which paid very well, but is a bit more boring. And then there's the fashion editorial work, which paid very little, but is super fun. So like, there's always a range to that. The fashion editorial, like, is always something that I love. The reason I got into fashion photography there was not because I love fashion. Funnily,
Hmm.
like I actually don't really care much for clothes, to be honest, or bags, or shoes, or brands. I just really liked being able to have the control of creating my set, having a team to work together towards like creating these final images. So like for me, fashion has never been about reality. It has always been about a fantasy. Like when you look at fashion models on a runway, you see them wear these clothes and like these models are like gorgeous. They have like wonderful bodies and they wear the clothes and everything looks amazing. And from the seat below, you look up and you're just like, maybe one day if I wear the outfit, I'll look as good, which of course is a lie because they're
Hmm.
models, right? But like it's the fantasy that gives. And I feel like when I do all these fashion photo shoot campaign, the fantasy that is provided to all the clients of just, or the consumers of just like, it's this like dreamy wonderland, or like when you wear this, you will have this vibe, you'll be this cool, you will be this person in this scene, in this set. So like that was something I really enjoyed, that I was able to create all these sets, to create all these stories and images that will draw people in, they want for themselves, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and then, but obviously, like during the downtimes, I did boring stuff like photo shoot shampoo bottles, cause that paid. You just
Totally.
gotta do what you gotta do. So yeah.
It's interesting to hear you say that like, we're really meant to end up in fashion because I feel like, and I don't know if like your NFT works are maybe inspired by your background in fashion photography or, because I'm looking at some of the pieces that you have and, it's like the characters that are in your works are sort of wearing these like very like fashionable looking like articles of clothing and I'm curious about, I guess, the impact that, your background in fashion photography might have in your NFT works.
Yeah, of course. Like, having done that for 10 years, like obviously I think the impact it's very clear. If you look at my fashion photography work and you compare it like side by side to my 3D work, I think you should be able to see that there are some things that are quite stylistically similar. There were a lot of skill sets that I had from photography that was verbal, like how I would photograph my models, how I would post them, light them, composite the shot, yada yada. Like all the skill sets were all actually brought over to 3D. So
Mm.
like for me,
Can
coming into the 3D space, I actually had this visual language that I had built up for a decade that was easy for me to bring over into 3D.
hmm can you like talk about that more? Like you're talking about like the way like the lighting and the composition, like I would have never thought that,
Yeah,
so I'm curious to hear more.
yeah. So like as a photographer, in the first earlier years, it's always about like, okay, finding your style, finding what you enjoy. And I think every new creative always wants to stand out in a way that like, oh, I have a style that people can recognize me by. And I had a mentor who basically told me, because I was also struggling with that, right? I was just like, I don't know what I like. I just know I like some stuff. And my mentor basically told me that like, take a week to find all the images you can find on the internet. Like anything that you like, just save it, put it in a folder, and then from there, after the week, go through the thousands of photos in the folder and like figure out like what are the common topics, what are the common themes. Like, do you like the color red? a lot, like stuff in the shadows a lot. And so like I did that practice, and that was where I started to find out like, okay, there are certain colors I'm more constantly drawn to. There are some lighting styles I'm more constantly drawn to. And like so, I started to do the work in photography to really focus on creating those kind of lighting styles, the kind of the way I wanted to portray my models. Like often in photography, I often push towards like having like strong women. I never liked photographing men. Most of the time I felt photographing men to be very boring. So like yeah, that was like never something I was interested in like then. So like I guess in the same way when I started creating my 3D works, like men don't really appear as much in my works just because like naturally I'm just more drawn to the female expression. I just feel like, a female model can carry out so many more different expressions and vibes to go for. Like very often when I was photographing men for male fashion campaigns, it was just like, look cool, cool to the right, look cool to the left. Like there's just a lot lesser range to play with. But like with female models, like there was just so much more. And so
Mhm.
like that was what I also brought over to like the 3D side. And yeah, like the lighting, it's something that was very easy to replicate. You kind of just have to learn it. You have to know like how lighting works, whether like if you use a big light source, it'll be very soft, very small. Like it just works exactly the same way in 3D, except now like I don't have to go through the pain of setting up the light, like the light stands and everything. Cause like, oh my God, that used to be such a pain when I was doing photography. It's just like I would spend an hour doing my setup, and then like by the time I'm done and my model's ready, I'm already tired. I want to sit, I want to
Mhm.
go home. But like with like 3D is just like, yeah, I'll just like put this huge light above my model. It's like, wait, I don't like it. Let me take it out and just delete it. It was so much more easier. But yeah, like I said, just even like the camera angles, how it composite the scene, these were all like things that I had learned through my photography days that were brought over to 3D. So yeah.
I'm curious, like, what led you to move from like photography to 3D work? Like, what sparked that for you?
Mm. COVID.
Oh.
I think, like, yeah, COVID was a hard time for a lot of people, right? Like, it was a big change for everybody. And for me, I think I was very aware that like, okay, as a fashion photographer, like great, my job is really not exactly an essential job. Like I like yeah, I think I had the self-awareness to realize that. And so like I was like, all right, I'll stay at home and like just bum around and see what happens. I played games for 2 months and then decided that I should probably do something a little bit more productive with my life. And so I guess from there it was just yeah, I was like, oh, can't photograph real models. I'll just make my own, and 3D just made sense.
Hmm.
And so that was really just the push for me. Like, okay, I'll just learn 3D and figure out how to make my realistic models. And even then, it was always with the aim to go back to the same clients I had, to
Hmm.
tell them like, if you ever need virtual models, I have them because it was something that I also saw that the world was going towards something more virtual, something more digital. So for me, I didn't go into creating 3D models for NFTs because even then I never knew NFTs existed. It was just for future proofing myself, I guess. Like,
Hmm.
wanting to make sure that I have a space where the technology was going.
Hmm. I have two questions after hearing you talk about that. One, what games were you playing during COVID, and did that like influence at all like the 3D work that you started making?
I was playing Assassin's Creed and I was playing Borderlands. I don't think they were super influential, although like when I was playing them, the story I told myself that I wasn't wasting my time was that, they are also done by other creatives and therefore I am getting influence and exposure and like maybe in my subconscious somewhere in my head I am somewhat
Hmm.
influenced by it. I don't know, but like it's not clear to me. But
Yeah.
yeah, those were the games I was playing.
And then my second question was because you mentioned like, you had your original clients in mind and that you would let them know like, oh, if you ever need 3D models, like I'm available to do that work. Have any of them reached out to you since you started creating
they
like 3D work to do? Hmm.
yeah, they actually have. It took them a while, like it's more recent that they have.
Hmm.
But like I think it was really at the end of 2020 that I was like, okay, like my models don't look like shit now. I should be I should reach out to the clients and let them know. And at the time I was like, okay, I needed to create proof of concepts, right? I had to prove that like you can use my model in these scenarios. So I would put my models in outfits in different sets. And in a way, I was creating all those images for that reason. And it was basically, in a sense, creating digital art. So when I first about NFTs early last year, it just made such sense to like, oh, I'm already creating sort of art, so I'm also try the space. So I just decided to get into NFTs that way. Um, but yeah, like it was I think if not for NFTs, I would have definitely talked to the commercial clients a lot more. But like after entering the space, and then being able to create my own artwork without having to have clients' approval, client direction to do whatever, I think like just so much more freedom, right? Like as an artist, as a creative, it's just like, oh yay, I can do whatever I want. It's so fun. So like I kind of never needed to go back to the clients after that.
Hmm. Is it, do you think that like with the freedom that to sell your art via NFTs has given you, like do you think you just like don't have interest in working with clients anymore, or is it just kind of like you can be more selective?
I was definitely more selective. I think like there's always clients out there that everybody in different industries want to work for, right? Like the big ass clients, you're just like, oh, because in the end, in the NFT space or being an artist, there's still quite a lot to be said about branding and marketing, right? And like certainly able to work for certain clients is good for branding. To be able
Mm-hmm.
to name them that like, oh, I've worked with this client, this client trusts me. People rely on social proof and it is, yeah. So like for me, like if these clients that I've always wanted to work with come, I probably wouldn't say no. I mean, I got to work on with Vogue early last year for the first Vogue
Mm-hmm.
NFT, and yeah, I mean, you don't say no to Vogue.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What
So
was
like yeah, there's yeah, certain clients always say yes to.
what was that experience like making the first NFT cover for Vogue? Because I'm like, if you're doing something for the first time ever, I'm sure that's quite an adventure to like figure out like how to make it happen.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that I feel like it's wow. You it's not okay. I always say like it's not about being the best, it's just about being available, being an option. Not to say that you shouldn't try and be the best, but sometimes people are looking for artists at a certain time, and if you're there, you're just an option that they could possibly consider. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that is a really really big thing that like people often don't put themselves out there to be considered as an option, and therefore they just don't get the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like as a fashion photographer, like the Vogue cover has always been the goal, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
fashion photographer is like Vogue cover, you want to get the Vogue cover. And for the last 10 years, like I got published in Vogue like here and there, but like I never got the Vogue cover. And 4 months into NFTs, and I'm just like, oh, wait, what? Vogue cover? Okay. Yeah, so like I think what happened was basically I was hearing news that like Vogue Singapore was interested in NFT, so I just reached out. I just said like, hey, I do fashion, I do NFTs, you all fashion, you all interested in NFTs, just I'm available. And they were like, oh, you're what we're looking for, awesome. And so like we just started talking, and like they paired me up with Fabricant who are making this awesome like digital outfits, they still do it. And so yeah, that was kind of it, the opportunity from being available.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like a lot of artists don't know the type of like background work that goes into sort of like securing clients. So it's, I don't know. I feel like hearing you say like you don't have to be the best, you just have to like be there, I think is really like honest advice about how to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
about
yeah.
um
Yeah, I'll say a bit more about that. Like I got to photograph Billy Porter for like late 2019, and like I feel like a lot of these opportunities that come about, it sounds so glamorous, right? It's just like, oh my God, you got to work with who for what? Like, how do you get there? And like the real honest truth was like before I went for my trip, I just sent like thousands of cold emails to all the different like stylists, the different marketing managers, the different celebrity agencies, and I just sent it all to see like who was willing to reply me. And of course, like cold emails is always a long shot. Like you don't go into it expecting anything because like that's just a setup for like disappointment. But like you do it anyway, and that was and I was just yeah, Beauty Forest manager replied me. And that was just how I got to photograph beauty for it. It's just asking is free for me, and I feel like that's something that people take for like they take it like as those like oh I'm so shy I shouldn't ask yada yada but like asking is free. Like, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is that nothing happens, which wasn't
Mm-hmm.
gonna happen anyway. you know, so
Yeah.
you might as well try it out and see what happens from there. And that's something that I've always tried to tell the artists around me. It's just like, oh, you try, ask. What's the
Mm-hmm.
worst that could happen? Yeah, for me, just do it. It's a bit of the hustling energy. You just gotta do it. Put yourself out there.
Yeah, which I'm sure translates pretty well to the NFT space, right? Like you have to like sort of hit the ground running and just be like, "Hi, like it's me. I do this kind of work. Like, do you want to be friends? Like, do you like it seems like very translatable like skill set."
I mean, like, let's be honest. I feel like for most artists, we are awkward introverts.
Hmm.
I feel like I was very lucky to enter NFT space after having like the 10 years of freelancing because I really got to learn a lot of the lessons that you know, there's the line of like if you do good art, they will come, and then you realize very very soon that like that's a lie. Like they don't
Hmm.
come if they don't know you exist, right? And so like you
Hmm.
have to learn to put yourself out there. I would go. When I was younger as a photographer, I'll go for all these fashion events. And the thing about fashion events is like everybody's all dressed up, right? And like they
Hmm.
they give off this vibe that they know what's going on. And like I was like, I had no idea what's going on. I'll go to the buffet table, eat way too much food, and then go home. And like you just kind of have to start, right? Like you have to put yourself in these scenarios that you don't enjoy.
Hmm.
And like it's also things like I got to do Asia's Next Top Model, but like if you ask me, was I comfortable in front of the camera? Like fuck no.
Hmm.
It's really awkward, right? But like it's good for branding, and like I still had fun. Doing Twitter Spaces now. Like is it like something that like I dream of? Like oh it's tiring, and like you have to garner the energy to be enthusiastic about it, and like I enjoy the conversation, but like you have to push yourself to do these things to make sure people know you exist. And I think people sometimes they look at all these artists who are doing all this and they're like, oh, you're extroverts, like, oh, you're this and that. And like sometimes I feel like they take their introversion as a excuse of a bit like, I'm an introvert and therefore I shouldn't do things I'm not but
Hmm.
like you can, just that nobody will know you exist then. You just
Yeah.
have to take it as it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are photographers, and I have one friend in particular who is always saying basically something along the lines of what you're saying, which is just like clients won't just email you and be like, "I heard you do photography." Like you need to tell clients that you exist. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
like you can't just like sit around like waiting for emails. You have to like go make those emails for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like people look at all the successful people out there, it's just like, oh, they got there because of this and that. But like a lot of times it just comes with a lot of very tedious, unglamorous emailing, talking to people, sending SMSs, like it's a grind. There is a
Hmm.
grind involved and you kind of have to want to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This kind of leads me to my next question, which is that you co-founded NFT Asia. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
How did you come about creating that? Like, what was the impetus for that? I'm curious if it like relates
So,
to you talking about like letting people exist and like connecting people or.
Well, I mean, sort of. I would say like how it started was basically I was, doing NFTs earlier last year and during that time before the Beeple boom, right? Like it was a bit more quiet. There was just less people around and I got to know Clara, who is now the founder of NFT Asia. And she was writing an article then and she was looking around to interview like NFT artists. And so like there wasn't many in Singapore. So like she naturally reached out to me because like, there wasn't really a lot of options to go for. Uh, and so like we had the conversation, we did the interview and, we clicked and it had a good vibe. And so after that, she told me that she was in a Discord with like a couple other friends from Singapore who were also in NFT. So she invited me into it and I joined it. And I was talking to them. I was saying basically that during then most of the conversations were happening on Twitter or in Clubhouse, and that
Mm-hmm.
every time I came across Asian, it was just like such a rare occurrence, right? Which is so weird because like statistically, there's just so many of us. So like I was just like, okay, like clearly we are not being seen, and we don't really have a place to congregate. Like a lot of the conversations are happening in zones, so like I asked them like, why not we open up this Discord, like have it as a
Mm-hmm.
space for like Asian artists to come in. And they were like, oh yeah, sure, let's do it. And so we did. And yeah, I think in a way it's like, yes, on one hand, like, like you want to build the connections and whatever, but also like, we just wanted more friends
Mm-hmm.
to hang out with and chat with. And yeah, what it was, just like a space for people to come together and talk about NFTs or food.
Mm-hmm. Have you always been, because like, have you always been interested in sort of like building? Like, was that something that you would do in your time as a photographer?
No, actually not really. I think what was interesting for me was that, as my time as a photographer, um, how isolated being an artist was, a creative at least, like how isolated being a creative was that like even in photography, I only hung around the space of people doing fashion photography or commercial photography. Like I didn't really speak to people doing events or food or documentaries. So like I feel like the creative industry has always worked in this really tight knit circles, but like very closed off. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I entered the NFT space, was just like, oh wait, wow, I'm just getting exposure to all those artists from like this doing all the different kinds of mediums, all the different kinds of styles, and that was really exciting for me. I don't think I set in like starting out wanting to build a community. I think like it was really just like I want more friends, in the space,
Mm-hmm.
and it just became a community from then on. But like honestly, I really just got so many friends out of it.
Yeah, I feel like the thing that's interesting about NFTs is just like you're encouraged or like enabled to go make friends in a way that like you weren't maybe encouraged to do so outside of NFTs. Like to your point about like, oh, like as a fashion photographer, maybe you didn't hang out with like documentary photographers and like here everyone's kind of like, oh, like a friend who seems like interesting and cool, like let's talk, connect or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I think what was so exciting about being in this space was that every single person that was coming across already hit two checkpoints, right? They hit the checkpoint of being a creative and they hit the being open-minded. Because like you
Hmm.
can't be not open-minded while you're doing NFTs, right? You kind of have to be somebody who's interested in like new technology, innovation, something very little people have done. And like to be in the space means like they already checked those two check boxes. So like it meant that a lot of the conversations were just very easy and very smooth from there. Like they are people that I could already relate to. Yeah, so I think that made it a lot easier that these were people that I knew were my kind of vibe already.
Hmm. I mean, if you were to give people advice about how to go about creating and finding their own community within the Web3 space, like what kind of advice would you give them?
I think sometimes people, like of course asking around to see like what are the available communities. I mean, like for me, like the NFT Asia community, it's an open community for like anybody. Because it's kind of hard to gatekeep Asian. Like if you have an
Hmm.
Asian get grandma, are you Asian enough? Like it's just like oh, if you want to join, just join. Like we do silly things together. But other than that, it's also I think like finding like artists you like and making friends with them, and eventually I think like communities also build up from that. Like I'm also part of another collective called Bloom, and it's just like it built out from another Discord that I was in, and like it's just yeah artists that I really admire, and to be able to be this collective with them like is something that I find to be very inspiring, and I'm very flattered to be with them, and so like yeah, I think you just be in the space and you have to have an open mind to like talk to people. You
Hmm.
do have to do the legwork of like chatting with them and getting to know them. But like I feel like this sort of things like you just find people you are connected to a lot easier.
Hmm.
I think it just becomes more natural from there. Like it is natural that like collectives build up. And it's natural for like cliques to happen. Like it's just the way of life, right? Like you just find people that you like, and then you want to hang out with them more. Yeah. So you just gotta put yourself out there.
Yeah, I feel like that goes back to sort of your advice about like finding clients also. It's like, oh, you just have to tell people that you're like around.
Yeah. I mean, like, the analogy I used to tell people joining the NFT space was like to kind of imagine it as like a party, right? Like when you go to a
Mm,
party, and you're awkward and silent, like find that one other person who's also awkward and silent and like chat with this person, and then like you have one friend, like suddenly the party is less terrifying, and then like maybe your friend had one other friend, and then you guys are now a trio, and like it's less terrifying, and like you're willing to go to do more stuff and like as a trio to talk to more people is also less terrifying, and that's the only way like the party gets a little bit more fun, right? To go with friends, like go with people, and like just don't be that person who talks about yourself, because like nobody likes that person. I think it's very much the social behaviors of real life reflects the same way digitally. You just meet people that you want to support and they will support you back. Like I feel like it has to come from a very genuine space, right? Like I feel like sometimes people they come in and they're like, oh, I want to have followers. I would just go and like, and like drop like emojis on everybody's post, right? But like, what are the kind of comments you want for your art post? Like you want somebody to say like, oh, this is how I feel. Like this is what I see your art. Like this is beautiful. Like as an artist, I think like this art is the kind of comments you want to get. So like I
hmm
feel like why don't you just be the person, give it to other people first, like that's how you make connections, be the person to comment the things that you wish you could get for yourself, and that's how you reach out to others and make true proper connections. And then like when you have connections in the space, it just becomes a lot more fun, a lot less boring. Like when you first start out on Twitter, it's a grind because like you don't know anybody, you're just trying to get to know people. But like when your
hmm
timeline is just filled with friends, like
hmm
supporting them is easy because they are your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just that sort of thing where you just kind of have to do it first, and then you make friends along the way. It becomes a lot more natural.
hmm Do you feel like you've a lot of friends whose work, like for example, if you were to like curate an art show, do you feel like you have a lot of friends whose like works you have themes in common with through the space?
Um, I would say, I mean, like curation itself is a bit difficult. I mean, like I can definitely pick friends that I'm like, oh yeah, I love to be showcased beside them. I don't think I have the curation like, oh, like our works would definitely look good together. But like
hmm
as a like, it's more of like, oh, I would love to be showcased beside these certain names because I look up to their artwork. I get inspired by their artwork. I love their work ethic. Yeah, so like definitely I can name friends that like I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to be showcased beside them. Whether the art looks actually good beside each other, I'm not sure.
hmm
But yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at your foundation page right now at some of the different pieces that you've sold on here, and I'm noticing like a lot of sort of reoccurring motifs. I guess that's why I was like asking about, if you were to curate an art show or whatever, because I'm like looking at your works, and I guess I wanted to pivot and sort of like get into more your art practice, and I guess like what are some of the things that inspire the works that you're creating. So for like one piece, you have like maybe these like fish swimming across this model's face, or maybe like flowers blooming. And like, I'm curious like where your inspiration comes from. Like, are you referencing art history? Are you thinking about like movies that you're inspired by?
Mm. I
Mhm.
I would I would like to say that I'm inspired by art history because it sounds really smart, but I don't actually know art history very well. So like it's kind of one of the things I would love to say one day. But I would say that like it's very inspired the same way that how I would done my photography, I guess. So like I've got the few photographers that I love and I still love. I think one decision I had made when I moved from photography over to 3D was that I didn't want to create works that could have been done in photography because like then I might as well do it in photography, right? I wanted to
Hmm.
do something that was a bit more fantastical, to do something that was like, okay, my model's in space. Wow, she doesn't have to breathe. That's cool. Or like, oh,
Hmm.
she's underwater. Or like, I've got makeup moving across the face. You know, I've got like jewelry moving in a way that it can't move in real life. So like that, to have that slightly like surreal, fantastical element to it to make it like just that bit different, but still with this kind of like the same visual style that I've done in photography, but now in 3D.
Hmm.
But I guess also like inspiration wise is every time people ask me this question, I'm just like, oh man, like my answer is so cliche. It's basically, yeah, I get inspired by everything. But
No,
I really think it's true though.
I don't think that's cliche. I think that's like beautiful to be able to pull like inspiration from a lot of places. It's also interesting to hear you say that you don't feel like you're inspired by art history because I'm looking at this piece called Luna Moon, and she kind of has like a almost like a painted on her face, and it reminds me of sort of like Asian like watercolor
Mm,
paintings.
mm, mm.
And then I'm also
Yeah.
looking. Oh yeah, go for it.
No, 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 no. Oh, that was just, yeah, never mind. Go for it.
Uh, I mean, not I. It's okay if you're like, it's not like. I think also it can be easy to think that what other people will pick up in your work is like different than what you were thinking about when you made it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, of course I get that. I think for me, like when I created that piece was like it wasn't like, oh, I knew this
Hmm.
Chinese painter who did this Chinese style and I'm inspired, but he was just like, oh, I think mountains would look cool. Chinese
Hmm.
mountains, yeah. Yeah, so,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, so like I feel like, if art history, um, coming into the art world has actually been fairly intimidating after coming from a commercial world, because like the art world has always portrayed itself to be this very very serious thing, right? Like this, there are just
Hmm.
like theses and research, and like people write like descriptions that are like so freaking long, and like they and like
Hmm.
the art world has its own language, right? It has its own vocabulary, it has its own terms that like if you're not part of the art world, you're just like, I don't know what that means, and so like I've actually found the art world to be somewhat intimidating. Um, and it was, and like, sometimes and like to stare at something and go, oh man, I think I'm just an uncultured swine because I have no idea what that means. I feel like it's one of those things that has always made it like it has drawn a line between like people in the art world and people outside of it.
Hmm.
And the only time like this actually changed for me was because when I was actually in Venice for the Venice Biennale, I had a piece showed there, so like that was really cool. But anyway, yeah, so like I was in Venice and we were at this bookstore and I saw this book that was like funnily targeted, right? And so
Hmm.
I obviously picked it up, and in this book, the way it talked about art was suddenly it was like, what is sculpture, right? Like sculpture is basically this creative person saw this of wood or cheese or stone
Hmm.
or whatever and just chipped away at it until he was happy. And that is sculpture, and like what is abstract art, like this artist took a bunch of paints and just splattered it on the canvas until this person was satisfied with how it looked. And then suddenly it just, to me, it became just less terrifying. It's just like, oh, it's just a person doing something until he was like it expressed whatever this person wanted. And then
Hmm.
suddenly now, as I do my art, I no longer feel as intimidated that I'm like, oh, I am not this artist who have just like descriptions of like ephemeral this and big words, to describe my art. It's just like I do what I do because it expressed myself well. And
Hmm.
yeah, actually I have no idea where I was going with this.
No, I love it. I feel like some of my questions I've been asking you, I'm like, I don't know where this question that I'm asking right now is going. So I'm glad that you similarly have like a feeling like that. I wanted to ask you, I mean, we don't need to keep talking about inspirations, but I'm curious about like what are some of the things that you do to sort of get yourself in like a creative mindset? Like when you sit down to make a piece, like what are some of the things you do to sort of feel like ready to take on the piece that you're working on?
For me, I feel like the hardest part is always having the concept, the story, the idea, right? Like, what do I want to do? And like that part always takes the longest. For me, I think it's just being a visual artist. Like, there's a lot of like scrolling through Pinterest, really, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and trying not to pressure like with deadlines and stuff. It's just when you see something and it just inspires you, it just does, right? So like that's why I also said like when I was playing like my computer games previously, like fine, I was also playing the game, but like at the back of my head I was just like, this was done by a creative. Like when I watch TV shows, these are all done by creative. Like there's so many creative teams working on like movies, TV shows,
Mm-hmm.
games, and like for me to to watch it, to participate in it, to play a game. Like I feel like I am being exposed to their creativity, and in a sense, like all of these things will somehow end up somewhere in my subconscious that could inspire me one day. And so yeah, I just kind of do all these things to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Go on Pinterest and basically try not to stress myself about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, Amazing. Yeah, I love hearing about artists' sort of different like creative practices. Um, so I wanted to go back to something you were talking about earlier, which is just that you've kind of been in the NFT space for a while and you were early to it, and I'm curious, like what are the things you've learned along the way? And I guess how do you feel like this year is different from the year before, and how have you like navigated those changes within like the market?
Mm-mm-mm. Well, I think last year, obviously, like the market was a bit smaller, right?
Hmm.
And there were a bit more consistent like artists that you always saw, the same collectors you always saw, and it was kind of funny because like, I remember there were these Twitter spaces like roundtables of like collectors who would come up with like, oh, like guidelines on like how artists should, scarcity, all of that, and then yes, yeah, I just saw all of that fly out the window. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, right. Nobody has any idea what's going on.
Hmm.
And I think like that also makes it easier that like, yeah, we are all just blind people just finding our way through this weird NFT space.
Hmm.
Um, and like, I think one of the things I've also learned was that like, as people, I think social behavior of like putting people on a boat is something that's very, very common. Like we put people like the collectors and influencers on pedestals, and that you realize they're humans too. So like I think the line I always go for is to remember this, just like, yeah, collectors, they shit too. And like, yeah, I
Hmm.
think it's just like, all right, like this person is a human being. He wakes up in the morning, he brushes teeth, maybe he has to take a poop just like a normal
Hmm.
human being like me, and like I do art day by art, but we are all human here. And I feel like that makes all of like people less intimidating, less scary. And I feel like that is a better start to conversations also, that like when you have this conversation, there isn't this weird power play where like the collector somehow like placed in a higher position than you are. But like, no, you're an artist. Like they want
Hmm.
your work, so like you're speaking on equal grounds, right?
Hmm.
What else? What else did I learn from the NFT space? I think it's like for me personally, also like this is the first time I got a chance to be an artist, and
Hmm.
I had coming from a commercial world to being an artist, working with like just my instead of having like clients to tell me what to do. I
Hmm.
had underestimated how terrifying it was, to how vulnerable it feels, and how much emotions come into play when you put out your work that's so personal out there. And how much hurt it can feel when you don't feel that people are reacting the way you want them to. That was surprising. I never like. I
Hmm.
mean, like I being a female and like being a creative, I think like I knew that like I had a bit of a roller coaster emotion generally. But like, wow, like the NFT space is a real roller coaster of emotions, and like it's and having friends, having people that you can chat with, having people you can rant to are so incredibly important to, make sure that you know that you are also sane
Hmm.
while being insane. Yeah, so like
Hmm.
I think all of that.
Um, Hearing you talk about that makes me wonder, just like how do you, when you're navigating that roller coaster of emotion NFT space, like do you feel like any of that influences your strategy for how you release work? Like, are you ever like, oh, like I have to make like another piece, or like I have to do like a series, or like how do you go about deciding how you release and projects?
I think it really it I would say like the what I want to do, like the creation and the idea behind it plays a bigger part. Like, when I started to do all this mints, I would have like three pieces of like, my three set beauty pieces. So like that came like, okay, they are three one of ones. Very simple, right?
Hmm.
And then like of my pieces I had like only one single idea. So like, oh okay, this would be just a one of one. And then when I did Love is Love, it only made sense that like this was a big collection. So like, all right, here's
Hmm.
a big like to be fair, like I haven't been very creative in the sense of like, oh, let's try additions here, let's try additions there.
Hmm.
I've definitely stuck a bit more to like, okay, like one of one simple, like I don't have to go to OpenSea and look at the floor price, because like
Hmm.
everybody does that. We all know, it's impossible to like tell yourself to not see it. So, yeah, I guess like I feel like the one of ones are generally a bit easier for me.
Hmm.
But again, that's dependent on artist to artist.
Yeah, like when you're one of ones, like are you just like, oh, like literally like, oh, I just finished a piece. It's um time to like mint it and then you mint one, or do you ever go like, oh, I finished like three that are maybe one of ones and then like I'll mint these three time. Like, do you think that you have a strategy, or is it literally just like, whoop, I did it, here it is.
So like it depends, right? Like if it's a set, like a set of three one of ones, then I will want to render them all out at the same time before minting and make sure that they all look cohesively well together. Like the speed
Mm-hmm.
is the same, like like making sure that I don't mint something and then like the other two is somewhat a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So like I try to do that, like make sure that I have them all together before I start minting them. But like for one of ones that are solo, it's very much of like, I did it! Oh my god, like now I need everybody to see it now. So like
Mm-hmm.
yes, yeah, like some people they'll be like, yes, I have done out the piece, now I will start the promotion for it and read up for like 2 weeks before it's posted. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my god, it's done. I need to mint it now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not very strategic about it.
Yeah, sometimes I'm curious how like artists plan out when they are announcing or minting new works, and like what they found works best for them. Have you found like, even though you say you haven't really had much of a strategy, do you feel like any particular way has worked better for you?
No, actually, like I've got a set that's coming out, and I'm still like, huh? How should I do this? So still struggling. The problem, the space is just it changes so fast all the time, right? Like what could work
Hmm.
now might not work in 3 months' time, and what could work 3 months ago might not work now. And so like just like, uh, let's, it's just kind of like, all right, let's just see what I feel like doing at this moment right now, like how I want to promote it, and then like just hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you feel like you're anticipating, like, do you predict any changes happening in the market? Like if you had like a crystal ball and you're going to say like this is what the NFT space is going to be like in 6 months, what say it's going to be like, just based on your
Oh
time
my,
here. Sorry, I don't know if that's like
oh
an
my.
insane question.
Yeah, it's a bit insane. You are right. It's a bit of an insane question because like it's so vague, right? Like what could happen in the NFT
Hmm.
space? Well, I mean, like let's for sure. What's for sure is more artists who are gonna join, so like that's awesome.
Hmm.
I would think that more of the trad art artists will also come into the space, which also I think is awesome. I would hope that there would be more, like the market matures a bit, but again, that's also very dependent on like how the market grows, right? Like it's like once on one side, a lot of artists are saying like, oh yeah, like some collectors they need to be educated, but like on the other end, it's just like collector he will buy whatever he wants to buy, like
Hmm.
like if I was a collector, I want to buy whatever I want to buy, like I don't want to be told I need to be educated in that sense. So like it's
Yeah.
also a bit difficult. And I guess the problem with the space is just like the onboarding is just so difficult and what a pain in the ass. And as I don't think that would be like solved in six
Hmm.
months. But
Hmm.
like once that is like properly dealt with, I think like the onboarding process and like the space will really start to boom a lot more, which would be
Hmm.
very interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, I was mostly asking about like what you think about the future of the space, because I wanted to lead into a question about what is next for you. Like, do you have any projects that you're excited about coming up that you might want to share? Any alpha about upcoming Shavonne Wong works?
I have a set of three that I have kind of like finished doing that I'll probably be dropping it with like the monolith gallery on Super Rare.
Mm-hmm.
But like that would be happening soon. So like if anybody wants a sneak peek, you can DM me.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else is under NDA, so I can't say it.
Nice. So you must have something really exciting coming up if it's under NDA.
To be fair though, every brand gives an NDA, so it's not that
Okay.
exciting. It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
always.
yeah.
It's pretty exciting, but like it's not always exciting.
Yeah. It sounds cool though. Um,
Yeah, I'm
I
excited.
um it's the last 10 minutes. And I was wondering if there was like anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover. I feel like usually when we end the Twitter spaces, I ask our guests if they have any advice to give artists who are like new to the space or just in general. But I feel like you've been giving a lot of like very good advice throughout this whole Twitter spaces.
Uh, yeah, I think so too. I guess just do it. Just whatever you want to do, just do it. That's kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very Nike. Nike got a really good
Mm-hmm.
low like catchphrase because like it really is true. Like in life, you want anything, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Um, I guess I feel like we've got like a pretty killer Twitter space. Thank you for being like such a good guest. I don't know if there's like anything else you want to cover, you want to talk about before we sign off.
Um, well, I guess like if anybody here is looking for a community, like NFT Asia is open. We are an open community and we are very friendly. We play game nights. We have karaoke nights. Very bad karaoke, but like it
Oh,
exists.
nice.
Um, yeah, it's truly important to me that like people find friends here because like it is a hard space.
Hmm.
Mentally and emotionally, like there are dry periods and you know going forward, like we don't like nobody really knows how the crypto space will grow, right? For me,
Hmm.
I believe in NFTs because I believe in a digital future. And
Hmm.
to believe in a digital future means digital assets make sense. And to me, that's what NFTs are. And so like for me, the tech is staying, but like um, you know, the crypto space, I feel like it also will exist, obviously, but like it definitely is going through like an up and down period, or it could go sideways for very, very long. And sideways is kind of when it gets very boring.
Hmm.
And that's when I feel like you will see more artists leaving the space just because not only are they not selling, it is also dull with no, like right now there's still drama and like people complain about it, but like they come on Twitter and they're like, oh, at least it's entertaining. Like when there is
Hmm.
no drama, literally like nothing is happening, I think that's when, it can get rather difficult. So like I would really encourage people to find friends and find communities that talks about NFTs, but also talks about other things that, you can just make friends with.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Um,
Thanks.
Thank you again so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Aw, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Also, as a treat, we put on the homepage so people can go and easily check it out.
Oh my God, yay, thank you. Appreciate
Um,
it.
yeah, everybody go check out Siobhan's work, go check out NFT Asia, and go find some friends.
Yeah, go
Uh,
find some friends.
Go find some friends. Cool. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.